Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to Copper Jacket TV. So it's nice to finally start the new year with a little bit of good news for the people of the state of California. You might remember I made a video just a couple months ago talking about a new manufacturer that doesn't exist in California yet, but was about to have a few new things added to the California handgun roster, but we just didn't know when it was going to happen. Well, it just happened today on January 1st, 2025. So we're going to talk about what was just added, along with a bunch of other new things that were just added as well. So let's get to it. Now, real quick before we get started, if you support the Second Amendment, consider hitting that subscribe button. It's free, it only takes a second, but it really helps us out here quite a bit. It helps us spread our message, and it lets the powers that be know that you guys want to see content like this, which allows us to continue doing what we're doing. So again, I would really appreciate your support. Thumbs up is always appreciated, and that little alarm bell will let you know when new videos come out. So with that being said, let's get to it. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about what's going on here. Now, I want to start off by saying that the roster just shouldn't exist at all. It is a completely unconstitutional, government-approved list of things that Californians are allowed to have. After fees are paid and tests are done and changes are made so that they are compliant to state law, then maybe they will end up on the roster and maybe the people of California would be allowed to have them. Again, there's nothing in our nation's history, nothing in our nation's tradition that would support a law existing like that today. And thankfully, lawsuits like the CRPA's lawsuit in Boland v. Bonta might actually have a chance to overturn the roster. And so we could actually see the roster disappear completely in the future, which would be nice. But Boland did give us a little bit of a heads up, because Boland was able to stop the micro-stamping provision that existed on the roster that stopped anything new from being added. So for a long time there, nothing new was being added. Things were falling off one by one, and then, eventually people were stuck with less and less every single year. Well, thanks to Boland v. Bonta, the micro-stamping provision is no longer a requirement, and so we're starting to see new things get added. And so while we wait for the roster to get overturned, it's nice to get these little victories where people in California can have things that they didn't have before. And so that's why we're discussing these new additions today. So with that being said, what was added to the roster? Well, if you guys remember, a couple months ago, I made a video talking about shadow systems and how shadow systems might be approved for the roster soon. And it was just today. 3 models of shadow systems were added to the roster. And the cool thing about this is the first time that anything based on a later generation Glock has been added to the roster, because these are based off of Gen 4 frames. So this is a really interesting development and something that I think is really cool, because again, it's kind of the first time that we've seen something like this in the state of California. So let's go ahead and take a look at the list of everything that was added just today, January 1st, 2025. Okay, so here's a look at what was just added to the roster today, and it's actually kind of a big list. You don't typically see this many things get added to the roster in a single day, but here we are. And you can see our 3 different models of shadow systems. So we have the DR, which is duty roll, that's based on the 17. We have the MR, which is multi-roll, that's based on the 19. And then we even have the XR, which is basically the crossover, that's based on the 19X. So I think that's pretty cool. Plus a bunch of other stuff. You're going to see some duplicates in here, and that's because when it comes to colors have different SKUs, and each SKU, believe it or not, has to be submitted as something completely different. So for instance, if there's one small cosmetic change and that causes a different SKU, then in California it has to be submitted to the DOJ and has to go through the whole process over, and that has to be added separately to the roster. And so sometimes it just comes down to colors based on seeing things that are the same, but you see them multiple times in a submission, like you see right here. Especially with the Rost Martins, you can see that it basically comes down to color, but it's the same exact design. So what's going to be different about these versus what the rest of the country would get? Well, unfortunately, there had to be extra engineering done to meet some of the requirements of the roster, like having a loaded chamber indicator and a magazine disconnect. Those are two things that had to be added, or there's just no way that they would get approval from the California DOJ. So those two things right there are going to be different. As far as everything else goes, pretty much exactly the same. Now, I know sometimes you have to sort of take this stuff with a grain of salt because we all know that the roster shouldn't exist and we don't want it to exist. But in California, especially if you're watching this and you're from out of state, that's literally all that is available to you unless you want to get something that's off roster, in which case you're going to have to pony up because it is out of control. I've got a couple things that were off roster, and people in the rest of the country would laugh if they knew what I put down for it. So again, it's just what's available until we can get the roster overturned. There's more than one lawsuit. There's the CRPA lawsuit. The FPC has a lawsuit. This is being attacked on different levels and from different directions by two major organizations. And so the chances of this getting overturned, regardless if it happens at the Ninth Circuit or it happens at the Supreme Court, I think are pretty good. And so again, while you have to kind of take each little victory with a grain of salt because it's not exactly what we want in completion, it's still a little victory, and we have to celebrate those because before the CRPA was able to get microstamping enjoined, this would have never happened. If it wasn't for Boland v. Bonta and overturning that microstamping provision, this wouldn't be happening right now. It's now that microstamping is gone, that's why we're seeing all of these new additions. And so for me, that's a victory. It's a victory that's still in the works, but it's a victory nonetheless. And I wanted to share it with you guys because we just got to celebrate every little piece of freedom that we can scrape back from the state of California. So I want to thank you all very much for watching. I just wanted to let you know about that. You guys have a great day. Happy New Year to everybody out there, and take care.